Jean, welcome to the Science of Psychotherapy podcast. It's so great to connect with you.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, and Richard here. We're shouting across the pond, as we call it down here. So you're in New Zealand, which is fantastic. Yes. So we've kept everything in the Southern Hemisphere. I can't tell you how pleasant that is for time zones.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh. True.
Even though you're a couple. Now what we're here, Jean, and because our wonderful friend Jean Annan, who everybody listening will know because he's a great friend of the Science of Psychotherapy, said, "Oh, you've got to talk to this woman." I think he probably said it in an American accent. And then we got this book, The 7 Dimensions. I love it. Children's Emotional Well-Being. It's fabulous, of course. So John's absolutely right. Now, this getting down to, but getting back to the fundamentals, which is what we're talking about in the Science of Psychotherapy a lot. Sure, there's all kinds of things that we are doing, and you can learn the 5 steps of that and the 6 steps of this. But we've got to get back to understanding what we're all about. And in expanding our understanding, which is what I think this book does. But can you just maybe start with we've spoken a little bit about you, but what are some of the things you'd like us to know about you and how this book became something of importance and how it eventually came out in print?
I work as a psychologist and I'm currently in private practice and working with young people. I have found in the last 2 or 3 years, I've been working with an unprecedented number of 8-year-olds, young people who would start school around the time of the COVID struck, and and definitely seems to have hit that age group. But yes, I'm in private practice. But before that, I've worked in a variety of roles. Originally, I was a school teacher. I trained as a educational psychologist, worked for several years in a government organisation for supporting young people in schools. And then I spent, my goodness, I was working at Massey University teaching the educational psychology training program. And I was there for many years, probably 15 years, I think. I haven't really stopped to count. And when I left there, I went to work, contracted with the Ministry of Education in New Zealand to work with schools on projects that brought psychology into schools. So given that I have done a lot of work in school, this book has been written really to support that work. The book addresses teachers as the primary audience for this book. No, when I say teachers, I mean educators, school counsellors, resource teachers, psychologists who work in schools. But the principles of the 7 dimensions are equally applicable for parents and parenting. And I've even some of the clients I work with here in this office and in schools, I have them, the teenagers, reading this book. In fact, it's not because they're learning about biology and neuroscience in school, and for some of them, they find it, they can connect with it.
And I think that the wonderful thing is that we try and do, I know we constantly battle people saying, oh, you're just talking about the science, the facts. And we say, no, science is also the philosophy, the meaning of, and it's that integration of, as Ian McGilchrist would say, the left and right hemispheres, the details and the facts, but also that thing that allows you to feel more human and to understand your humanness more, because that's where all this stuff really comes from, doesn't it?
It does. And I think if, as you read that book, every chapter is different, and it starts, the earlier chapters are far more mechanical and look at brain functioning and our responses to safety and even the aspects of brain functioning that are supported by positive relationships. But as the book goes on, we get to chapters 6 and 7, or the dimensions 6 and 7, and they are more about the meaning and the purpose, the stories that we have about ourselves. Because one of the assumptions through this book is that we all have stories about ourselves, and that we act in accordance with those stories. And what a lot of young people and the people around them are often stuck with is feeling that those stories are not negotiable. That sense that this is who I am, that there is a real me, and our stories of ourselves are negotiable. And I guess that sort of underlies this whole book, really. Yeah.
Well, I'll just remind people that or I'll remind you, just
I
quickly.
might need reminding as well.
But the overview, so the simple 2-word aspects of the 7 dimensions. I mean, you actually expanded into more broad questions, but
yes.
So there's safety,
Yes.
alliance, positive experience, consistency, optimal disequilibrium, which is kind of about learning, and you can talk about that a bit more.
Yeah.
But then, as you say, the last 2, self-narratives, and what I think is one of the most important is the 7th one, of belonging.
Exactly.
Yeah. So they're the 7 dimensions that and each chapter talks about each one. But it's interesting, those first couple, you say they actually lend themselves a bit more to some more technical information, more sort of factual detail.
They did, and I was a little concerned when I wrote the book that might not be the best material to present, to the reader trying to pick this book up. Yeah. I do have to say, look, get to chapter numbers 6 and 7, and you'll find it easier to engage with.
But we do. Yeah, laying the groundwork is important, right? We have to lay a foundation, which is what you've done. So I'm wondering, without getting too technical, if we could sort of just let's do a little walkthrough and a little summary of these dimensions.
I think so. That would be about what these dimensions are, for instance.
Yeah, please.
So the 7 dimensions, they're organised into 3 layers, and at the core of a person's well-being is their sense of safety, and without sense of safety there is no well-being. That's a key a key dimension. Surrounding those 4 other dimensions, which are alliance, positive experience. I'll unpack each of these actually a little bit, not too much, but just a bit. And optimal disequilibrium, consistency, of course, but enveloping all of those the self is meaning, and self-narratives, and sense of belonging, which is more the identity. How do I fit in this world? And in a way, well-being is it's bookended by sense of safety and meaning. Well-being sits between those 2.
For the YouTube viewers, we can just put that diagram up, and so it's a nested sort of diagram of circles within circles of, and as you're saying, that sense of safety is the central element.
Yes.
And we had wonderful, Ruth Lanius talks about that, Marshall Lyon, everybody gives that. And moving as the outer circle that encapsulates it all is the meaning, which is, as you were just describing, that sense of meaning. And we talk about that a lot with the science of psychotherapy. I mean, it's great to know, it's important to know the technicals, but if you don't know what it means to you, then it's different. And that inner circle is experience. And so you've divided that. So belonging and self-narrative are in the meaning. And those areas, alliance, positive expression, consistency and optimal disequilibrium in the experience, and then safety. So it's wonderful. So that's like that philosophy, the experiential in the middle, and all leading to that sense of safety.
Those 4 experience dimensions in that inner circle, they are the ones amenable to change. So those are it's very helpful for people working in schools to have a smaller number. 7 is a lot to focus on, but the experience dimensions are the ones that school staff and parents and others are able to focus on, the expectation that children's sense of safety and meaning will be enhanced by enhanced experience in those middle dimensions. So in a way, sense of safety and meaning are outcomes of experience.
Yes, that sense of emergence from experience comes the meaning, and that organizing principle, if I'm thinking in complex systems, that if we have the organizing principle of safety, but that's one of the problems too, though, is what you were saying. You have a lot of 8-year-olds coming in, and I'm guessing that you could boil it down to lack of safety or a loss of sense of safety, and this must be quite concerning.
Yeah. A loss of safety, particularly in the social environment. If we look at the 4 dimensions, their social development has been very different because their experience has been in a home environment rather than a school environment. It's been more likely to have fewer young people to relate to hone up those social skills and the nuanced sort of aspects of getting along with one another. It also seems to have impacted security of friendships as well. The disequilibrium that young people sense in a classroom, sometimes it's academic, although the academic for the young people I see does not seem to have been affected to the extent the social development has. So at the core, sense of safety, and sense of safety is, the first thing that the baby asks when they're born: am I safe? They probably even ask it before, goodness knows, I don't know. But am I safe? And the answer to that question, of course, is critical to their well-being. If they feel safe, then they have that freedom to explore and learn. And if they're not safe, they're going to be they're going to avoid and very much close themselves off from that learning experience. But it's a question that we ask as a newborn, but we continue to ask that through our lives. Young people ask that every day at school. We ask it right now. Am I safe? Am I safe? And we never stop asking that question. It's a paramount question always.
Yeah, and I think there's that. I'm not safe, so I'm asking. But then it's also just that reassurance. I was just thinking, as you were saying that, I was thinking, I really enjoy saying to my wife, I love you. And then I really enjoy it when she comes back, I love you back. Because if she doesn't, then
my goodness.
But there's a difference. There's sort of several levels of safety that seeking it, just reassurance, and then also just that compounding, just maintaining. So there's a few things. Yeah,
and going back to the 8-year-olds who starting to go to school during the COVID period, there's been a distinct lack of all of those levels of reassurance of safety because they've been hammered with the world is fundamentally unsafe.
They have. So there are many, there's the media, the discussion they hear around them, and that coupled with consistency, which is one of the dimensions that I'll get to.
Right.
It definitely, they don't feel safe. They feel very much at sea. And it's a matter of helping them feel grounded again and helping them have that sense of control, because I do sense that people all around them also can't predict the future in a way that they could, so they don't have that sense of control. And when people don't have a sense of safety and the control that goes with it, they can't take agency in their own lives. They're depending on other people to pave the way for them. So, yeah.
So let's look at those. Just unpack those 4 experiential dimensions.
Okay, so let's look at those. The first one, I've called it Alliance, because it's about having somebody at your side, and it includes a whole lot of different types of relationships, right from attachments, which are critical, to friendships and relationships between school staff and young people. It's about all of those, just feeling somebody is at your side, not necessarily always on your side, because as a good parent and teacher, sometimes you're not necessarily on their side with their little hiccups they have with their friends, whatever, but being at their side, whatever, really that unconditional. And I would say, particularly for the attachments, of course, friendships are not quite as unconditional as attachments, and particularly close friendships, they're actually more conditional than acquaintances often. So, but having positive relationships relationships, alliances, and safety, they develop hand in hand. You're never going to have one without the other. Those two really are critical. Positive experience. This means that most of our experience is pleasurable. That doesn't mean that everything in life is always positive, but it means that for the majority of our time, and I guess intensity comes into it as well, but for the majority of our time, we're experiencing positive emotions, or at least neutral emotions. There are times when negative emotions do have their place. Fear of crossing the road, an obvious one, and fear of driving too fast in a car, even. These things they have a positive, a positive effect. But the majority of our experience needs to be positive for us to experience life as something that has meaning and gives us pleasure. Repeated positive experience is really important for young people, and it's very easy for people just to remember repeated positive experience. Of course, what is positive for one person is going to be very different from what is positive for another. But yeah, so the next one is consistency. Young people always look for patterns. They're looking to understand the world by trying to understand the patterns around them, and learning the patterns around them allows them to predict what will happen next. They can predict the future on the basis of the patterns that they observe. And to help discern those patterns, there needs to be a degree of consistency within their familiar environments, but also across their various environments and different settings. For instance, an obvious one is the cultural practices in the home environment and their match with the cultural practices of the classroom environment or the school environment. Where there's a good overlap there, it's very easy for young people to figure out what's going on, understand the patterns, and be able to participate. they'll be able to understand not just the explicit rules and procedures of a place, but also the implicit understandings that you only get from knowing those patterns.
And again, coming back to your 8-year-olds who are starting school, there's been an awful lot of inconsistency there, hasn't there? I mean, from going back to home or learning online, and then back into the classroom, but with, masks and different restrictions, and it's been topsy-turvy.
School's been on again, off again, and then we've had times when school's open, but if parents don't want to send their young people to school, well, don't send them today. So that probably is one of the greatest problems that we're dealing with right now. Is in the past, school being always open, compulsory, really gave young people a huge support, a structure that allowed them to be flexible and grow. Now they've got no walls around them, no blanket around them. There's just it's just they're not discernible boundaries. And I think, without becoming authoritarian, those boundaries need to be nicely reestablished. And
I was going to say there's probably a middle ground, isn't there, between being really strict and everything very rigid to anything goes.
Exactly.
So
we've almost sort of gone back to laissez-faire, not intentionally. It's definitely the children are finding it hard but it's a bit loose. They're a bit at sea. Definitely. So consistency is a massive one at the moment. But optimal disequilibrium is an interesting one, because what this suggests is that we're not always totally consistent. And it's like, what we used to learn about good enough parenting or good enough teaching, that the odd error here, forgetting to pick your kids up from school one day or something like that, is not always a bad thing, as long as it's not frequent and consequential. It does help children to learn some things. Too often, dropping young people into the deep end is not a good idea either. But it just means that the brain needs to be a little on edge in order to learn, because otherwise we're just going in loops around our established neural pathways. If we want to learn something new, if we want to establish any new neural connections, we need to learn something new. We need to do something different. So there needs to be enough inconsistency, I think, to excite the brain and to provide a bit of novelty, to make it interesting as well. Otherwise we get very bored and depressed. But then we also don't need so much as to overwhelm the brain and be in a crisis state where really we're not learning well at all. And that band of optimal disequilibrium is not a static one. It changes day by day. If you're a kid in school, it'll change class by class depending on the topic and the teacher and the who's in class with you. It's one of those things that of course some young people have a shorter fuse, or should I say a very narrower band of disequilibrium, because they avoid as a result of some unpleasant experiences maybe in the past. But it changes from person to person, but it changes within a person and over time.
So we have to be very sensitive to the individual as to what that tolerable inconsistency is. And then and across a span of time, like you said, too, from day to day, it can change.
Teachers actually say to me sometimes, this is the hardest one to get. But that's what, to a certain extent, that's what teaching is, getting that, actually understanding that. And I really understand why they find that one the hardest to get. But what I also find is that teachers who attend well to create a safe environment with good relationships, consistent routines, and allowing children to have pleasurable experience in learning and that sense of success that goes with it.
Yeah,
Seem to be able to gauge this well. They know know the students well enough to be able to do this in a very intuitive way.
I think some of the most memorable classes I had, if I remember back to school, was the teachers where, they created a safe environment, but they introduced just enough inconsistency or novelty to make it interesting, to make it a little bit challenging, but not in a way that made you feel like you're out of your depth.
No, that's exactly.
As apart from the ones that were always the same, everything was always the same, and you kind of get a bit bored with that. So you like the ones that sort of add that little bit of spice,
Exactly. That's right, because your brain's going to go somewhere else, if you're just doing.
Well, it is. I mean, it's that balance between problem solving, creativity, as well, overwhelm, as you say. I mean, Csikszentmihalyi stuff is quite good to understand in that when you look at the broad aspects of it. Everybody sort of thinks it's all about the flow, which is just one element. Yeah. But where you move into challenge, and then there's that tendency in our culture to actually do that easier one where the skills are in excess of the challenge, and so you get control.
Yes.
But as you're saying, it also leads to quite a lot of boredom.
It does,
and that rapidly moves around the other way down to boredom and apathy and some of those elements.
Yes.
Yeah. When it comes to kids, you don't want them to be bored.
You do not want them to be bored, and often a sort of knee-jerk reaction to somebody not learning is to make it easier and easier, and often disengage them.
Yes, that's interesting, and potentially the opposite, make it not so much more challenging, but more interesting.
More interesting. I mean, you see kids, they pick up games all the time.
Yeah.
Because they find their optimal, their little zone there, and they're so engaged. Yeah. They're so engaged because they're excited. There's a little bit of a challenge there, but they know what they're doing. They know the rules. They know they can see where it's going. Yeah.
Yes. It's like being able to run free, but in a paddock. And interestingly,
that's free, but in a paddock. I like that.
I do. I remember my wife. She was a scout leader for a couple of decades, and she said that she would go to these big group things, big jamborees, and some of the leaders would be quite rigid and what they were doing, and all the boys were all doing exactly the same stuff. Some of them were just not anything at all, and say, off you go, do whatever you want. And so the kids would, they'd disappear. And she said, what we found is if we gave them boundaries, we said, you can't go beyond that point, you can't go beyond that point or that point, but you can do anything you want in the middle. That for the vast majority of the time, those kids were more creative, more inventive, more breaking off into individual groups, and so going into. So this is the sort of stuff that obviously this information helps you understand. I mean, but it is something I just want to quickly sort of say that we were talking about before, that these are what is natural. This is what is healthily natural within us. And so there am I talking about Susie doing things with scouts, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But now we have to remind people again. We've lost touch. We've lost grip. Have you got any thoughts about this way we have to sort of re-educate ourselves to be, normal or human? We've got a bit dehumanized. I don't know quite what it is that makes your book so important.
And it is. It's about helping people be free in the paddock. I love that. Sorry, I've written it down.
Okay, because
it just describes something that I usually spend so many words trying to say, but it's like the fence has come down, hasn't it? And we're a bit at sea. And I think some of this is that the changes have been exponential over, and I know we keep talking about that, but they really have. One of the studies that I refer to in that book looked at the reports of challenges to kids' well-being, young people reporting sort of low sense of well-being, have increased massively since about 2012. So and before that, it had sort of fairly plateaued for some time, but something happened around that time that, I mean, the world has changed hugely, and what we expected to happen in 2 years' time, has happened in 6 months' time, and really it's keeping abreast of that, really, and keeping our systems robust enough to be able to adapt when they can. And I mean, I'm not even going to start to sort of point the finger at any particular changes, but there is definitely we don't have the security of the certainty about the future that we had.
I mean, it was Sir Ken Robinson been saying that for many years. I mean, he's passed away a little while ago, but he was talking about the fact that we're setting up curriculum for kids, and we have no idea what it's going to be like in 5-10 years' time. So that's hard for the kids. It's also hard for the teachers, I suppose, too.
Very hard. Yeah, it is. And helping young people to develop the competencies they need, the adaptability that they need, and to be able to maintain that hope and optimism for the future, to have that trust that their life is going to pan out in a way that is going to be fulfilling for them, is really I guess what we're aiming for now. And like you say, it's about being grounded again, as well as being flexible enough to change, but just having the basics. I mean, some of the studies in the book that you have there I mean, those are classic. Some of them are the old classic studies. It's going back to the attachment theory, and it's some of it's newer, but there's a lot of very basic kind of understandings that we had there. Yeah.
Look, and I'm sure that there's a whole lot of left hemisphere approaches to education involved here. Not going to go into it because that's a whole another hour's discussion. But I was going to say, when I was a kid at school, there was great hope and expectation for the future.
Yes, I think so. Yes,
and that really inspired you, to do well. And now, and you're saying now, and understandably, there's a lot of question marks about what is the future, and all this stuff that I'm learning. What is it going to be even good for? We've got, GPT, artificial intelligence, going to do everything for us, and so it is a very different time now.
It is, and it actually takes me to the last two, the meaning, and this is about meaning. And I'm doing some work with a school in New Zealand here, and actually just this morning, looking at what aspects of these 7 dimensions. I work with the school staff, and meaning is going to be the one that we emphasize because of just what you were saying. Meaning, the last 2 dimensions. The first, as I said, is self-narrative, the story of ourselves, and we get that from our observations of our interactions and what other people think of us. We a lot of the comments we hear about ourselves and responses we get, we write our story about who we are, and that story is that is negotiable, but often we don't know that. But it's critical, and a lot of work I do with young people is about helping them script that story. Had somebody just leave here yesterday with his old story and his new story, and he's left with the world off his shoulders, actually, just his new story. I hope that the new story sticks around, and probably have to maintain it, but the 7th dimension, belonging, is about how we fit in the world. It's about belonging to something bigger. And as Viktor Frankl talked about, what was their purpose? How did they fit? Where were they in the bigger picture of life? And a lot of young people are really struggling with that. What is this bigger picture? And to be part of a family, to be part of a school group, to be part of a church, or it could be a soccer club or whatever, but to be valued, to see that you're a person who makes a contribution.
And that vision's got to come from us, right? It's got to come from parents, therapists, teachers, because it's not going to come from mainstream media.
No, it is not. It's not, because it wouldn't sell. Yeah,
they've definitely been sold a crock with, this was realizing the number of likes you get on Facebook, and the belonging to tribes of success. Certainly, the business people have been arguing and struggling with this for decades. So it's that final aspect. I was just thinking in the belonging too. Dan Siegel just recently with his book talking what he'd been talking about for a decade, but the me and the we coming together,
exactly.
And we've been talking about the science of psychotherapy and others, but that mirror neurons, and Marco Iacoboni's been talking about it, that the idea that we're separate from each other is just biologically impossible, because we aren't. We're connected by empathy.
We live in relation to one another always.
Yeah.
And you even see this in the language. If you say if you want a young person to do something, if you say, you do that, it's very different from, come on, let's do it.
Let us do this.
Us do it. It's about getting to the point where you do feel that we're part of a we. Who is we? And so that is really where a lot of the work that we need to do right now is work with children's, the meaning of their life, their purpose, their hope, their optimism, their ability to predict a positive future. There is an educator in the UK, Valerie Hannon, who said that the single most difference that a teacher can make in a classroom is believing in the positive futures of the young person, young people that they teach. I finished the book by saying that, I can't remember the actual words, but it was about making it, there was one thing that we can do for young people. It's helping them to understand that they matter.
Yes.
And it's good to be them.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it's lovely. I sort of flip to the references often in a book, and it's just on the inside of the reference. So that was one of the first paragraphs I read, and I thought, oh gosh, if that's your last statement, I want to read the rest of it. So
right.
It's really lovely.
Well, that was fortuitous.
Yeah. So indeed, that we can leave them with those powerful things, and I think in the same breath, in a positive feedback loop, it enhances us as adults and teachers and carers to feel the same.
Absolutely, and the work of a teacher, parent, is so much more fulfilling when you engage with, the we is not just for the children, it's for everybody.
Yeah, fantastic.
Beautiful thing.
Jean, thank you so much for joining us here on the Science of Psychotherapy. Congratulations on the book, and we'll encourage everyone to check it out.